progress in chess, you must gain a deep positional understanding. Once you gain a deep positional understanding, you're going to progress in chess. Okay, so I'll give you an example how to gain a deep positional understanding in chess. You have to practice in this pattern, and there are so many methods to improve in chess, and this is one method. Okay, so first thing you need to understand is the mobility of the pieces. Like in each move, let's say it's currently black to play, and white will mate in the next move. So if black makes a move, in each move, black is going to gain control over some squares and lose control over the other existing squares. So this is going to happen. So changes will keep on happening move by move. So such changes could be either favorable or unfavorable. So your success ratio in chess depends on identifying and adapting to the changes of the position. That's where you gain mastery in chess. So you can have a look at this position. So here it's black to play. So first move black will make, and white will force checkmate in the next move. The mate doesn't exceed more than one move, and there are 34 possibilities for black here, and white meets all the 34 possibilities, and as I mentioned, the mate won't exceed more than one. So we are going to pay attention here and going to observe the changes that happens and how it impacts the position and how you can take advantage from those changes. Okay, so let's have a deep look at this position. So we'll analyze this in depth. So overall black has 34 moves. So queen has 22 moves. You can see queen can move anywhere in the file, it can move anywhere in the rank. So queen can move anywhere in the rank, can move anywhere in the file, and anywhere in the diagonal, anywhere in the ranks, files, and diagonals. So there are many possibilities for the queen here. So overall 22 moves for the queen, and this bishops, both the bishops, they have only 4. So this bishop has 2 moves, 1, 2, and the other one also has 2 moves. Okay, this pawn has only 1 move, and the rook has 7 moves because it can move on files and rank. So in file we have this many moves, and rank, and this capture is also possible. So overall 7 moves the rook has. Bishop has 4 moves, queen has 22 moves. Now we'll see what are the changes that will happen move by move and how to adapt to those changes. Okay, so first let's say if queen captures on b7, then we can recapture with the bishop, and that leads to a mate. And white's main threat is queen f4. Queen f4 is coming most of the cases. Okay, so queen b7 doesn't work. Queen b5, queen b5, we can go queen f4 because that is not going to stop the mate. So queen f4 forced, And it's same with queen b6 also. Queen b6 also, we can just play queen to f4, and it's a forced mate. Okay, queen d4. So we'll analyze the queen d4, because this time queen f4 is not going to work, because queen d4 blocks this rook's path. So if we move the queen, they have a chance to play the king to d3. So this is a new possibility. So black is gaining a new possibility to move here. Also white gains a new possibility. So we have to analyze this. So queen d4, earlier you have to see earlier which moves were not possible and it is possible currently. That you have to observe. That change is very important to observe, because when the queen was on b2, this knight on b7 is pinned. So this knight wasn't able to move. So this bishop also is not getting chance to come out. Now since the queen moved to d4 already, so this knight is free to go. So this knight gets freedom, and also the bishop. So they both are ready to move. So also we have a chance to give a double check. So we have to play knight d6, not knight c5, because if we play knight c5, you can see that blocks this rook's path. So it won't be a mate. So we have to play knight to d6. So knight d6 forces the mate. So queen d4 gives a chance for the knight to move. So queen d4 is met with knight d6. Okay, we'll see the other possibilities. Queen e5. You can see queen e5. Okay, queen e5, it's the same thing here, right? Because once again the knight is able to move, and the e5 square is also blocked by the queen. So anyway, knight to d6, double check. No, knight d6, I mean knight to c5. This time knight to c5, because we shouldn't be obstruct this path of rook's path. So we have to go knight c5. So knight c5 is perfect here. So mates. Okay, so queen d4 as well as queen e5. Queen d4 is met with knight d6, queen e5 with knight c5. Okay, so let's play queen b3. Queen b3, there is no defense for the f4 square. It's not helping the f4 square, so we can take support from the pawn, and we can mate. We can mate here. Queen f4 mates. Okay, queen c3. Queen c3 once again unlocks these pieces. So queen c3, but still we don't want to play knight to d6, because the rook's path will be blocked. The d7 rook's path will be blocked if we play knight d6, and the king will be able to get to d4. And it's the same thing with knight c5, that would block the rook's path, so the king will be able to get to e5. So we can play this queen to f4. Queen f4 mates. So queen c3 also is not going to stop. Queen f4. Okay, let's see other possibilities. Queen b4. Queen b4 also doesn't really help against queen f4. So we can force a mate with queen f4. Okay, queen b1. Once again, there's no defense for the f4 square. So here too, queen f4 forces a mate. So we can just take support from the pawn and then mate on f4. Okay, queen c2. Queen c2 also doesn't help against f4 mate. So queen f4 mates. Okay, let's try queen f6. Here too, queen f4 mates. There's no defense for f4 mate, so we can force a mate here. Queen c1. Queen c1, still it's the same. Queen c1 also doesn't help the f4 square, so queen can go to f4 mates. Queen h8, we are just analyzing all the possible moves of each pieces for black side. So we are starting with the queen, then we'll analyze all the other pieces. So queen h8. So queen h8. Okay, queen h8, we won't be able to make queen f4 mate this time, because queen h8, there's a check to the white king. So white has to block the check and unlock this bishop, because this knight is able to move now. It's free to go after queen h8. So knight can go to d8, blocking the check, at the same time unlocking the bishop. So knight d8 forces mate. Okay, so queen h8 was tricky, but still it leads to mate. Queen e2. Queen e2 doesn't help against queen f4, so queen f4 mates. Okay, queen to f2. This time it's more tricky, because they are blocking this square. I mean, not letting the queen to get there. Okay, we'll see what are the changes that happened after queen f2. Queen f2, we have chance to move the knight, because the knight is free to go. But knight c5 or knight d6 would block one of these rook's path. So king will gain mobility. So this time we can put the knight to d8. That's an excellent move. So leads to mate. Okay. So let's try the other possibilities. Queen g7, queen f4, mate. No defense against queen f4, so it's a mate. Queen a3. Queen a3, it's the same thing. Queen f4 mates, because there's no defense for f4 square, mates. Queen a2 also same. Queen to f4 mates. Queen h2, queen f4 mates. Okay, queen a1. This is the last possibility for black queen. We played all the possible moves. So queen a1. Here too, there is no defense for the f4 square, so it mates. Okay, now let's analyze the bishop moves. So we saw the queen moves. It was tricky. So whenever the queen leaves the b file, there is a chance for this knight to either go to d6, c5 or d8 in most of the case. I mean, in all cases it mates. Okay, so let's analyze the other moves. The other moves are the bishop moves. So both the bishop has overall 4 moves. Let's analyze the g1 bishop. Let's say if the g1 bishop goes to h2, so we have to observe the changes. Okay, so it actually opens this rank and we can take this, but there's no need for it because we already have queen f4 checkmate, so we can go for it. Queen f4 mate. Okay, bishop f2. This is another possibility. Okay, this time it opens the rank, mainly this one, so we can capture. So a new possibility is to capture the bishop and we can enter the diagonal and deliver a mate. So queen takes h1 mates. There's no defense. So the g1 bishop has 2 possibilities, and in both cases white mates. Okay, now coming to the h1 bishop. This bishop too has two moves possible. So g2 or the f3. So g2 is not going to stop the mate on f4. So queen f4 mates. Okay, now bishop f3. This is tricky because this time we don't have queen f4. We have to observe the changes that happened. So I mean bishop's f3. We can observe the changes. The changes that happened is this f3 square is blocked by the bishop. So the king on e4 won't be able to move to f3. So we can give a check on d3. So this time you can see the king won't have chance to move to f3. Earlier, if you observe, you can see whenever the queen goes there, the king has mobility here. Since they moved the bishop to f3, we can always go queen to d3. So changes happened here. So you can see the f3 square is blocked by the bishop. Okay, so we saw moves for both the bishop. 4 moves were possible and white mates. Okay, next is the rook. This rook has 7 possible moves. Okay, so let's analyze. So first, let's say they capture. Once they capture, what happens? We lose control over this rank. Earlier we had control over this rank. But once they capture on a5, we lose control over the rank. But still, we have a great control over the file. And this queen can go to f4. Still, we can checkmate. Okay. So rook a5 is not helping against the queen f4 mate. Rook c4. Rook c4. Also, there's no defense for queen f4. So once again, queen f4 mates. So queen f4 is the main threat here. Even rook a3 doesn't defend the f4 square. So we can go queen to f4 mates. Okay, rook b4, same thing. Here too you can see queen goes to f4. Okay. Rook a2. Rook a2 also is not going to stop the queen f4 mate. So queen f4 mates here. Okay, rook d4. Rook d4 blocks the file. So this time if we play queen to f4, they have chance to move the king to d3. Okay, so rook d4, we'll see what are the changes that happened. Rook d4 blocks the queen's path in the diagonal mainly. So the queen won't be able to go to e5 after rook d4. So the queen won't be able to block. So we don't need this rook anymore on the d file because we already have the control over the rank. So we can shift the rook to e7. You see the change that happened? The queen won't be able to move here. So you have to understand that move by move changes happens. So you have to identify the changes and play accordingly. Okay. So rook d4, rook e7 mates. Rook a1, rook a1 is quite simple. We can play queen to f4. So there's no defense for mate. And finally, they have only one pawn move possible, which is e2. We saw all the other moves. So the pawn has to go to e2. Here. And the pawn move also doesn't help against the f4 mate. So queen is going to go to f4. Okay. Okay. So As I mentioned, to progress in chess, you have to gain a deep positional understanding. Only then you can progress. For that, you have to observe the changes that happens move by move in chess, because each move will bring some changes to the position. It could block some piece path, or it could gain control over new squares, or it could lose some squares, existing squares. So there are changes constantly happening, and you have to find, observe, and find those changes. Then your success ratio will go very high, because once you start adapting and identifying, and then you start planning according to the changes, then your game is going to improve a lot. Okay, so we'll see more examples related to this in the upcoming lessons. Thank you.